Hello, fellow peasants. Today I'll be reviewing 1997's Stephen King's The Shining. Alright guys, so sorry about the lack of content. I was on vacation. I was out in South Lake Tahoe doing too much boozing, and I'm still in recovery mode. So I finally got around to watching 1997's Stephen King's The Shining. Basically, this film was... The Shining was adapted into a film by Stanley Kubrick and released in 1980. But a lot of people had complaints that it wasn't the best adaptation of the book. It didn't do very good. Stephen King wasn't a fan of the 1980 film. And so 17 years later, him and another guy, I can't remember the name of the director, but Stephen King is he is the executive producer on this project. It's a 4.5-hour miniseries that was I believe it was probably on television back in the day. I'm not sure. I was only like 11 or 12 when this was on TV, so I don't recall if this was on regular television or HBO or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, it's a miniseries, and it's the closest you can get, basically, film-wise, to the original novel. So I hear. Everyone knows what The Shining is about, so we'll just dive into what I like and what I do not like about it. What I like about the Stephen King miniseries is it is more fleshed out. You do get more background. Things make more sense. Like, there are things... Do you need a lot of it? No, but it is nice to have. There are things that I'm like, oh, okay, so, things that don't quite make sense when you're watching the 1980 film make a lot more sense once you watch this. There's just more background. There's more exploration into the characters. There's more character development here. And you just get the bits and pieces in between that Stanley Kubrick just left out and left up to interpretation. Even in the longer cut, there's 2 cuts of the 1980 film, and even in the US cut that is longer, it still leaves out a fair amount of stuff and leaves you questioning and things like that. So I do like that the story is much more expansive. It's fleshed out. You get much more character development and an explanation for things that you don't get otherwise in the theatrical version. I think the performances, for the most part, are okay. They're okay, with some cringe moments here and there. I really didn't like the acting of the kid who portrayed Danny. I didn't really care for that kid's acting. And but overall, I do think that the performances were decent. I mean, made for TV in the 1990s was not quality stuff. This is pre-Sopranos, pre-Game of Thrones, pre, what is it? So anyway, before television was sexy and had high quality production. So for the time, this was not a bad television production by any means. I think that the set, what's really cool about this is they did a lot of the filming at the Stanley Hotel that inspired the original novel. So that was really cool to see that. Because I was like, wow, this set design's fantastic. Well, it makes sense because it actually is the hotel. They filmed in the hotel. Not for everything. They used some, stages and things like that. They used some sets for certain scenes and whatnot, I guess. But a large chunk was shot at the Stanley Hotel. Instead of room 237, which was changed from 217 in the Kubrick film, they used 217 in this. I do feel there are some scary moments in here. There are moments that work a little bit better than the Stanley Kubrick. One of them mostly the one that really I think is creepier than the Kubrick version is when he goes in room 217 and the lady's in the shower or the bathtub and she gets out, like when Danny's in there, and then when she's after him, like I feel so much more like dread and tension for this old creepy lady than the one in the Kubrick film. I would just, not that the one in the Kubrick film isn't creepy at all, but there's just like when she's coming after Danny and he's trying to get the door unlocked and she's like slowly creeping towards him, like it ratchets up the suspense to like 11 in that scene, in my opinion. And I also think that there's a moment of dialogue. Like the film is the miniseries, should I say? I keep saying the film, but the miniseries is very slow and and it takes its time to build up this world and introduce you to the characters, but it really doesn't hit its stride until about halfway through. And there's a dialogue scene with Jack and Wendy in the main lobby of the hotel. That it's a great dialogue scene. It's them arguing, it's them fighting over things. And that scene there really is when the film just comes into its own. It's like, okay, that's the moment it had me locked in. Up until for about the first 2 hours, I was like, okay, all right, just kind of like too late to stop now. And then once you get to that dialogue scene, you're like, oh, okay, like, all right, like, here we go. There's some meat on the bones here. So what else did I like? I guess if I want to be more specific about the performances, I do think that the actors who portrayed Wendy and Jack, they did a really good job, I think. Their acting wasn't fantastic by any means, but I do think they did a good job playing those roles, and those roles are closer to what they are in the novel. Wendy was never as much of a pushover and whatever. Like, Wendy was very normal in the novel, and Jack's descent is more natural here, because this has an extra 2.5 hours or so, like an extra 2 hours to flesh everything out, as opposed to the Kubrick version. So it really helps you, it really lets you appreciate their performances more as those characters, because you get to know them more, and you get to see the slow descent into madness of Jack, and you get to see Wendy slowly realize that Jack is losing his mind and he's a piece of shit. And so, I guess what do I not like about Stephen King's The Shining miniseries? If I'm being honest, it's just too damn long. It's 4.5 hours long. I get that's what you need to flesh this out, but that doesn't mean I have to want to sit 4.5 hours for it. It's just one of those things you watch every 5 years or something. I couldn't pop this in with how long it is every 2-3 times a year or something. Like, this is something that comes around you watch it like twice a decade or something, It's just not something that you can watch repeatedly over and over, like something that's an hour and a half. I do think that it really does suffer from the made-for-TV's mini-series vibe of the 90s. It did have a very low-budget, cheap look. The aspect ratio here, I feel, also is detrimental. The 4:3 box look of the film, I really think that it is a detriment to the film, or the miniseries. I keep calling it a film. I really think that it should have been shot at least like 2391, maybe even 16:9, just a wider shot. I just think that it would have felt more grand and open, and with the mountainsides and the height of the hotel. I think it would have made it feel more grand and open. But they didn't. So I'm not a fan of the aspect ratio here, which can make or break really the experience of a film, in my opinion. What else? I think some of the horror aspects, some of the the ghost and them talking to the ghost. Like when Stanley Kubrick, I don't have a great way to explain this, because one of my negatives in this is them talking to the ghost in the hotel a lot, full-on conversations. And then I'm like, well, no, they talk a lot. Jack talks a lot to ghosts and things like that, and the Kubrick one too. There's just something about this one. I don't know what it is. It just comes across a bit more Disney Channel, hocus pocus, children's horror vibe than when it's done in the Shining film. There's just something off about it, and it's just not done to the same caliber and class that Kubrick did. So some things that Kubrick could do, other directors try the same thing, and it comes off like a student film, and that's kind of how the talking with the spirits and things at the bar, and when Jack is trying to blow up the hotel at the end and he's messing with the machine or the furnace or whatever, and the ghosts are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And there's just some of that that just comes off really cheesy. I didn't like Danny. The kid who plays Danny, he's just annoying. I didn't care for him at all. I wish they would have chose another actor for him. I just didn't like how that kid portrayed Danny. The kid was just, his face, like the facial expressions he had, and I don't know. He was just annoying. And then I didn't like seeing Tony. Like Tony, you find out is like at the end of the film is like how Danny looks when he grows up and graduates high school or college or whatever. But I don't like seeing Tony. I like it better in the Kubrick film that you don't ever see Tony. And so I didn't care much for that. I think that was a little cheesy a bit. The hedges coming to life, that's something that probably in the novel was cool. It just doesn't play well on screen at all. I didn't care for the hedges coming to life and moving and the bad CGI. That's just some things are just better in novels and they just don't translate to screen very well. But all in all, guys, what did I think about Stephen King's The Shining? I think it's okay to check it out at least once, just to get a different perspective. Maybe if you've never read the novel, to get a film version of the novel that's closer to the novel, because Stanley Kubrick took a lot of liberties with the novel when he made the 1980 film. And I think if you're someone who's a fan of the Stanley Kubrick film, you're a fan of the novel, definitely check it out. It's worth a watch. Would I watch it again? Yeah, I would. I'd pop this in another 5 years or something, like I said, but not something I would watch on a regular basis. And if someone were to say, well, which one tells the story better of the novel? Well, if you want to say who's more faithful to the novel, it's definitely Stephen King. Okay, it's the Stephen King miniseries. This tells the story better in the novel. What is more entertaining? Stanley Kubrick's film is more entertaining. But they're so far apart. They're so different in so many ways. Like, to compare and contrast is really hard to do. But, but that's it, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Stephen King's The Shining. Have a good one, peasants. Peace out. Bye-bye.